one of the top awards in our hobby, you know, and that really is outside the award program. There's a freestanding program of its own, and that's our Hall of Fame program. The Hall of Fame program actually started in 1969 by a council of past presidents that felt it was time and appropriate to recognize people that have spent a lifetime contributing to this hobby and making what it is today. And today, with the induction class of 2021, we have 357 inductees into the Model Aviation Hall of Fame. And we're able to recognize one of the significant individuals here today. I've met Bob Root for the first time today as one of our inductees, but I've read through his nomination paperwork, and well, I tell you what, he has really made a mark in this hobby. You know, he's been a member since 1949. He holds the enviable AMA. You can't even really call it a number because it's what we call a vanity number of grandpa. So that's what he's known within the AMA community. He's been significantly participated in his local club, the Ventura Comets out in California, and has started his modeling adventures back as a youth in Portland, Oregon. He went to Oregon State, where he achieved a BS in mechanical engineering. And those days, there was no such thing as an aeronautical engineering degree, but he specialized in aeronautics. And he went on to work in the industry and did such significant things as work with Northrop Grumman and was on the design team for the B-2 bomber. He was also very heavy into model competition. He competed in the Scale Masters competition. He's a master craftsman. He's also a pylon racer, which is dear to my heart. He competed heavily in the pylon community during the 1970s. And he actually designed a P-39 Aeroprogram that he kitted and sold something over 300 kits, right? So it's just been an amazing career. At this time, I'd like to ask Bob if he would come up and join me. Bob, good. You know, Bob, I'd like to tell us a little bit about your career in the hobby.
The fact that I'm being honored with this is absolutely amazing, and I want to thank everybody that was involved. I grew up in Portland, Oregon, and the first club I was in as a young man, even before high school, was Portland Stardusters, and it was essentially a free flight club. But I also built a lot of control line models because I could fly them locally at the school nearby. And then I'd go with the adults to fly free flight out in the country. And this was in 1949, 1950, 51, before high school. And I competed in a lot of free flight, not much control line, but free flight because the club was doing that. And we put on a contest every year. I soon found that the awards were like new motors and things. For a kid, that's a big deal. But you didn't want to be serious about half a free flight because there'll be 50 entrants. But half a payload, I saw payloads in the museum. I'd forgotten all about that one. And then there might be 5, and I got a much better chance of winning a motor. So I went on from that, and the club soon evolved to radio control because there were a couple hams in the club. And by the time I was a junior in high school, so probably about 1953, I built a Lorenz 2-tube receiver from model airplane news plans. And the club members told me where in Portland to buy all the pieces and parts you need to do that. So I started flying rudder only in those early years. And I kind of stuck with that, compound escapements and things. I couldn't, and I didn't do much when I was in college because I was working my way through college. But when I got out, then I got back into free flight and rudder only. But by then, everybody was flying reeds, but I couldn't afford them. So I hung out until the proportional came along. 1968, Cliff Weirick came out with a radio that was 100 cheaper than everybody else. The craft was like $495 or 400, and the PCS was 300. And so that was my first proportional radio. I built an RCM trainer, learned how to fly that, and then built an Aeromaster. I saw an Aeromaster in the museum. That brought back memories of the Spokane Internets. 2 years in Spokane, Washington, the clubs put on, I've forgotten the club name. The Spokane guy here could tell me. But anyway, they put on this big contest and got people in from all over, Southern California and so on. I won pattern in 1970 with an Aeromaster. The reason was all the judges were Air Force pilots. They were standing up on their trailer judging us and our maneuvers. And I talked to him afterwards, and he says, well, we know that biplanes are hard to land, so we didn't count your bounces. And I went on, and I won in '72. I think I won a couple of both the pylon, Formula One, Formula Two. We were really into that in Seattle. I was working for Boeing by this time when I got out of school. 3 of us in Seattle started up the Props, Pylon Racers of Puget Sound, and that group is still going. And our purpose when we started it in about 1970 was to get more interest in pylon racing. And we helped the clubs run the races, you know, with all the information they needed. They supplied the manpower. And so all through the early 70s, I raced in Seattle, Portland, and Pacific Northwest, Formula One and FAI. As far as all the things you read about there, I did have a couple of designs. When I went to the NAT, I went to the 72 Nats and the 73 Nats and competed in pylon. And I think the best I did was 5th, maybe in Formula 2, but I had a good time. And the editor of the magazine previous to the AMA magazine, I forgot what it was called, American Modeler or something. He was interested in, each time I showed up with a new airplane, he says, will you do an article? So I did an article with plans and drawing. I could do, you know, from work, I could do the drafting. It was all before computers. And I remember one of the things we put in the magazine was retractable landing gear, because I needed landing gear that was thin enough to go in a racing wing for Formula 2, and Goldberg hadn't came out. About the time the article came out, Goldberg finally came out with a retractable landing gear that was thin enough. Okay, so that's in the 70s, and then in late 74, I left Boeing and moved to Southern California and went to work for Northrop. So after 15 years at Boeing, I went down to work at Northrop, and it was the best move I ever made. The timing was perfect because I got in advanced design exactly when aerospace started looking seriously at stealth airplanes. That means airplanes that, besides being designed for performance and what it can do, were being designed for how it could be not detected by radars, IR, and any of the detection systems. DARPA gave us a contract to build something called Tacit Blue. And it was top secret for years, but about the year 2000, they released it, and it's in the Air Force Museum now. It was a stealth airplane that had 135 flights, and I was involved in the flight testing, getting first flight. That was really a thing for somebody like me that have always been interested in airplanes. And 135 flights, very successful, one of the most successful research programs the Air Force ever did. They were very happy with us. All that technology went into the B-2 bomber, and I'm sure that's one of the main reasons Northrop won the B-2 bomber contract, because at that time in the 80s, Northrop was not known as a bomber manufacturer at all. Anyway, I did work on the proposal of the B-2, but I didn't actually work on the detailed design of the B-2, because then I went on to another program to competing with Douglas. Northrop was competing with Douglas for the next Navy airplane, the A6 replacement, because the Navy's A6s were wearing out badly. And this was in mid-1980s. We worked on that project several years, and eventually lost it. So there's another loss for me. But I had my winner, so I was happy. After I retired from Northrop in 1995, a guy by the name of Tom Wolfe, and he kept seeing the models I was building and saying, you ought to compete. So that's how I got into scale, and the Scale Masters was Tom Wolfe's help, and he was my mentor in effect in this, and I just kept going, and he eventually passed away from ALS, and we're very sad about that, but that's where I am now. So I just like to build scale models. I'm not building as much as I used to. I seem to have more repairs now than I used to. And that sort of summarizes it, doesn't it? Did I talk too long? I always talk too long.
Well, thank you, Bob. I appreciate that. And I appreciate you and your family. If people haven't had a chance to meet him, his entire family is here. And I want to congratulate you for being inducted into the Aviation Hall of Fame.
Thank you very much.